welcome to Season 10, Episode 6 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
We are, of course, reading the Thomas Sowell Reader, this time looking at some of his articles on political issues. The whole book is kind of on political issues, but this time, more specifically, I guess, on political issues. Good section. I don't know if we read the same readings, if we read all the way through. I read up to Politics in One Lesson. We didn't confirm the sections that we were reading beforehand, so maybe I'll have to fill us in a little bit later.
I can muddle through.
You can always come up with something. That's for sure.
I don't know how to take that comment.
It's a compliment, I promise.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. What do you think of this section? This first, very explicitly political section.
Well, of course, everything he writes is great.
Yes.
And we could talk about Thomas Sowell's timeless advice for politics.
Well, these first two articles in here I thought were especially timely, especially relevant.
Mm-hmm.
This first article, it's called Ivan and Boris and Us. And he starts with the old Russian fable, which he very briefly summarizes. He says, Boris had a goat and Ivan didn't. One day Ivan came upon a strange-looking lamp, and when he rubbed it, a genie appeared. She told him that she could grant him just one wish, but it could be anything in the world. Ivan said, I want Boris's goat to die.
Yes.
And so the point is, he talks about, corporate CEOs and how people are like, they make too much money. And he makes the point that, even if they just gave up their whole salary, it would not change the price of goods, barely even a cent.
Yes.
And so that was especially relevant. I know we talked about this in the past couple episodes, but with the people, celebrating the assassination of the United Healthcare CEO, it's that exact thing. They didn't even know who this guy was, but they wanted his goat to die. They wanted him dead, as soon as they found out, that he was killed, because it is just that sort of extreme envy, I think, is driving a lot of it. And that's what he says.
Well, envy, and then he talks about the manipulation of the politicians that use that kind of a natural desire for a scapegoat or so to speak. This is when he wants his goat to die. But anyway, so I thought you're right. It's really timely, and Russian proverbs are brutal, but there's like a tough truth in a lot of them. Yeah. Like my favorite is, as you know well, I think, if you see a Bulgarian in the street, strike him. He will know why. I just think that's just such a brilliant explanation of violence against a group of people that I know, because it's you're identifying an other, and you're saying violence upon that person is appropriate. And you don't have to have a reason. They will know why because they're so evil or they're so bad. They will know they deserve it, even if you don't. I mean, I think it's just such a quick little quip, and I think it explains a lot of political violence.
Yeah, for sure,
in the world and human nature too. But
anyway,
back to Sowell's and what his point is on this using that example and talking about this envy. I think is encapsulated in this statement. The logic is simple. Demonize those whose place or power you plan to usurp. Mm-hmm. And so you pick a target, you demonize them, and then you take over whatever they have or whatever their power is. And he uses the example of, people talk about like CEOs being horrible and they're making so much more than the line workers, but then they don't demonize the entertainment industry or the athletes. And I always find that weird because Oprah Winfrey's a billionaire. Why isn't she demonized like Elon Musk? Of course, it's political, but like by the CEO that nobody ever heard of, and it's and of course it's weird to in today's society to defend health insurers, but they provide a necessary service within our system. Our system is set up so that you don't pay out of your own pocket for your own health care. You pay a third party to insure it.
Well, it's especially strange with the whole demonization thing of how many people on the left, are like, well, this should just be a government program. Yeah. We should just remove, the market out of it. But those are the same people who, criticized the government, 30, 40 years ago. The United States is the most evil regime. The CIA has done this and this and this, and, we've toppled other governments and stuff like that, and everything's poorly run. And it's like, okay, so you think the better solution is to have that same evil government come in, because that's what his point is, what Thomas Sowell's point is right. The government wants to demonize these people so they can come in and take over that industry.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, so that's the alternative. If you don't want these people running it, then the government's going to have to come in and take over that project.
Yeah.
Why would you want that? Why is that better than the alternative? And I don't think it is.
And he uses an example, and I think this is written before the financial crisis in 07, 08. Mm-hmm. He talks about the Community Reinvestment Act, which was an emphasis on providing subprime loans to people in certain communities. And I think he wrote this referencing how dangerous that was before it blew up. Yeah. And it blew up in the subprime mortgage secondary market, which is a whole different nightmare. But he mentions how, if the government's in charge, so the government takes over lending requirements, but then when it all fails because they effed it all up, then their solution is, well, we need more funding. Yeah. We need a bigger program. And so it's in a business, if the business goes under, then it goes under, and some other business is going to provide the service, or maybe nobody will because it's not profitable. And government just seems like it expands the power, and that's what part of his point was in this one.
Yeah. The next article I thought was also timely because this was, I think, written right after Ronald Reagan died.
Yes.
And then we just also had another former president die. Jimmy Carter just died.
History's greatest monster. Yeah. That's from The Simpsons. I don't really think he was history's greatest monster.
But yeah, no.
Do you know that reference?
Yeah. I think you've said it on the podcast before.
Oh, your older brother never heard of it.
Really?
I had to show him the video. Oh, that's pretty cool. The unveiling by Mayor what's-his-face in the Simpsons episode.
Wembley?
Yeah, I think it might be
Wembley,
right.
Yeah.
Wembley,
something like that. Yeah. But yes, this article was written, right after Ronald Reagan died, and I think just the first couple sentences really summarize it really well. It says there are many ways to judge a president or anyone else. One old-fashioned way is by results. A more popular way in recent years has been by how well someone fits the preconceptions of the intelligentsia or the media. Yeah. And that's absolutely true.
100%.
It's just...
It's only gotten worse.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. Because, these people, the media, whatever you want to call them, are so good at sort of framing the narrative. And they're so good at just sort of putting those questions out there. And it's like, okay, do they fit this question that was sort of arbitrarily created? Do they fit this narrative? I think less so the media now, but just generally the academia, sort of the experts, quote unquote. Actually, no, we're talking, nobody really watches like the talking heads on TV, but there's still that sort of conception out there that somebody has to determine what the standards are we judge people by. Yeah. And that has just been so warped. We don't actually judge them by the results. We judge them by whatever sort of narrative is being pushed.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fascinating to read this article that he wrote in 2004 about Ronald Reagan because he's so accurate about it. They accused Ronald Reagan. This was back in my very young youth. I mean, I was 18 when he finished his final term.
10 when he was first elected.
Yeah, right. So, but that's, I was a teenager, so I was aware of what was going on, but not like I am now. But, they demonized him as some dummy. I mean, literally. Yeah. I mean, they were just so condescending to him. And he was I think a 2-term governor of the biggest state in the Union, California. He had been, an actor, and they always called him, like, he did these silly B movies, I think they're Bonzo movies. He had a monkey. Yeah. He played opposite a monkey. Mm-hmm. And they're funny little things. But then he had this long-running radio commentary show. I don't know, it was weekly or whatever. It was before my time, of course. And then he was head of the union for the Screen Actors Guild, I believe, is one of those entertainment unions, which is really powerful in California. He was, of course, a 2-term governor. Ran for president before he got the nomination, so he failed. I think it was by Goldwater beat him, if I remember correctly, in the primary. I may have that wrong, but so he'd been around a long time, and he was an intellectual. Mm-hmm. He was a really smart guy, and they called him stupid. And then they of course said H.W. Bush was out of touch and all this kind of stuff, and they accused George W. Bush of being stupid, and he was no dummy. Yeah. I remember the Bush derangement syndrome was really crazy, because back then I was a Democrat. Yeah. And I was involved in local politics and some regional politics, and I go to these things, these events or whatever, and they would just say the most horrible things about Bush Jr. So this would have been his re-election campaign. And so, like, people that are as old as me remember all those things. And when Trump came along, They're saying this. They said the same things about Mitt Romney and about Bob Dole and about John McCain. They're probably right about John McCain, but in any event, and then they're saying all this bad stuff about Trump. It's like, wait a second, you say this no matter who we put up or who they put up.
Well, it's especially ironic now, seeing how much the media's covered for Biden the past 4 years. No, he's in the best shape he's ever been. Just sort of repeating these stories, and I think just finally, I think it was just a couple weeks ago, I saw a headline from the Washington Post, which was like, sort of op-ed, sort of news. It was like a look inside the White House with a declining Biden. Yep. So finally, finally after the election, just a month before, he's due to leave office. Now you admit that he's been declining these past 4 years. It's like, no, he's perfect. He's fine. But Trump's really stupid. Yeah. And Trump's, have you heard that Trump's really old now? Yeah. I don't think he can even serve in office anymore. Yeah. And it's like, all right, sure. Yeah. You just spent the last 4 years saying that none of those things are problems for Biden, but now they're major problems for Trump.
Well, and it begs the question, why aren't they writing stories about the cabinet? Why aren't they interviewing the members of the current cabinet and asking them, why haven't you had a meeting about the 25th Amendment? Why? When are you going to have it?
Or why haven't they had any meetings? I don't know if you saw this, but
they haven't had a cabinet meeting.
None.
And I think that's part of the reason. Yeah. You get all of them in the same room at the same time. They're probably on a voice vote say, he's incompetent. Yeah. So if they don't communicate, they can't assert the 25th Amendment. The vice president's got to lead that show anyway, or at least be involved. But I thought for sure by now, after the election, I thought by January 1st, they would have already asserted the 25th Amendment, made her the first woman president.
I think that's just proof just how many people hate Kamala Harris in the administration. I mean, that's the only possible answer why they haven't.
I'll tell you what, I think she should be in charge.
Really?
Absolutely, 100%. And mark my words, between now and when he leaves office, all sorts of nonsense is going to happen. We think these pardons and commutations of people on death row and pardons of his son are bad. That's nothing.
Yeah, that even wait till the last day to do those. He still has a few more weeks.
The worst is yet to come. Yeah. I mean, I don't even think I can envision how bad it's going to be.
Really?
I can't even imagine how bad it's going to be. But I just know it's going to be the worst ever, and I think it's going to be enough that we will probably have enough juice sometime soon to have a constitutional convention. I think it's going to be that bad.
Really?
And I think the revelations after he leaves office are going to be that bad about the corruption that we got to look at. The initial push is going to be to reform the pardon authority. The secondary one is to have age limits on offices. And I support both. I support the latter much more, but the first one, the pardoning, you almost have to have it absolute, because there has to be an ultimate authority for clemency and mercy. But the way it's going down now, of course, they should just assert the 25th, because we know he's not even signing them. Yeah. I mean, he's not competent to make a decision to pardon anybody, and nobody's going to convince me otherwise. Yeah. But anyway, but they accused Reagan of that. They accused Reagan of being a fool and a buffoon, and they accused Bush of that, and Bush Jr., and Trump, of course. And Trump made a mistake not pardoning all those J6ers. Yeah. But the fact that he didn't, in a way, exposed the level of corruption that I did not even anticipate, and how corrupt they were going after these citizens, who obviously many of them participated in a riot. But the level of vitriol and the corruption in the entire judiciary system of Washington, D.C., shocks me. Yeah. It shocks me enough that I was actually thinking, if this keeps going on, at some point, I got to figure out a way where I can do pro bono work in D.C. I mean, it's because there were a couple of people in Missouri. There's one guy in Cedar Hill that got picked up on that. Yeah. I thought, well, but I can't go fly into Washington, D.C. to represent somebody. But if it was going to keep going on, at some point, everybody's got to step up. But and Liz Cheney, going back to the Reagan stuff, Reagan, Bush, Cheney, I really think Cheney lost her that election. I think RFK won the swing votes for Trump, and I think Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney, I think that really caused a lot of voters on the left to say, what are we doing? Yeah. I mean, I can't think of a person that was more demonized. You're too young to know this. Dick Cheney was demonized. I mean,
I've heard. I mean, I wasn't there for it, but yeah.
They hated him. And now I'm starting to actually think that they may have had a point. But he was CEO of Halliburton in his period of time outside of office, and then he left that position to become vice president. He famously ran the search for the vice president for George W. Bush Jr. And after looking at everybody else, he decided he was the best candidate, or George W. decided he was the best candidate. Well, why don't we just hire you? Yeah. All these other guys are idiots. But he left that job, and then there was a whole bunch of no-bid contracts in the Iraq War that were awarded to Halliburton, and it really does look bad. But now I'm thinking maybe it is all just corruption. Yeah. But they hated him for that, and they hated him for everything he did. I mean, they demonized George W. Bush, but the way they treated Dick Cheney was equal or worse than the attacks on Trump. Yeah. That's how bad it was. And can you imagine at some point, I guess if Trump said, I support a Democrat in 10 years, if he's still alive, maybe he'll be their patron
or
saint,
one
like
of his children.
It's different because Dick Cheney also endorsed her.
Yeah,
Dick Cheney endorsed Kamala Harris, and they celebrated it as if it's a great achievement. Yeah. And of course, the Republican Party hates the Cheneys now for various reasons, because it finally dawned on us that she is just corrupt to the core. But the Democrats always hated them.
Which is going back to what we're talking about, one of the craziest elections of all time, where Kennedy's essentially on a Republican ticket. Yes. And then the Cheneys are endorsing the Democrats. It's crazy.
It shows the corruption of Washington, D.C., how it's transactional. It's kind of
going to that machine, which is much more in the Democrat Party now.
Anyway, I've been on too many rants in this episode, but I've been very articulate.
Yes, I agree. That's great.
Our listener is enthused.
Moving on from that article, unless you had something else to mention.
I always have something else to say.
The compassion racket. This one was interesting. Because this one was talking about hurricanes. I'm guessing this was written right in the wake of a bad hurricane in Florida.
Yes, there are a number of them.
But he's saying essentially, why do we keep having the government, bail people out for building their houses in the paths of hurricanes?
Yes.
That essentially the message of this is if we stop doing that, then people would build somewhere smarter. But we keep incentivizing them to rebuild their houses. And then we treat, the governor, or whoever's, providing these disaster funds like they're some sort of saint. But his message is, let's just incentivizing them to just keep building there again and again and again, and then more death happens because people keep living in those same spots.
Yes. Well, and the same arguments were made for flood insurance in our area. So there was it was known as the flood of '93. It was the biggest flood of the Mississippi River all the way up and down.
Yeah, there's several states. Of it, a bunch of restaurants in town and stuff like
that. But the response after that wasn't 100%, but much of the federal assistance was buyouts and restrictions on rebuilding in the floodplain. So you had zoning changes all throughout the Mississippi River area, so that you end up reclaiming it. So you're familiar with Arnold City Park, that trail that runs, that was a subdivision. Those roads were actually subdivision roads.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That was a complete subdivision development that was flooded again in '93. But they had enough money from the feds mostly to buy out that entire neighborhood and tore down all the buildings because it floods every year. Yeah. It flooded all the time. And so but we don't do that with the coastal properties, with these multi-million-dollar mansions. And there's a lot of truth to this still to this day. And God bless him, Ron DeSantis is very effective at disaster management. But I think it really should be looking at why are we using any taxpayer funds every year to deal with these multi-million-dollar mansions along the coast? I think
it would make more sense, and I think it would be a better decision to turn those into parks. Because the Florida coast is beautiful in places where you do have those parks set up. Other places it's just condo nightmares and these big McMansions that are just kind of ugly. But it's I think that would make more sense and would save lives.
I think it's fine for them to have private development, but sure. I don't know why any taxpayer money should be spent to rebuild them.
But if we are using taxpayer money, we should be using it so that we're not having to rebuild them year after year.
Right. And so, but you see, then you have to decide about roads and bridges. And a lot of that's local money, but certainly federal money shouldn't be used for that. So if the locals want to keep rebuilding the bridge to, there's some resort town, I guess that makes a certain amount of sense. But that's what he's saying is that the individual property owner should bear that loss. And if they can bear the loss, or they can pay for their own private insurance. But if a hurricane, like a storm hits, like tornadoes are a little bit more random. I mean, they're all over the Midwest, but we've never, knock on wood, we've never been hit by a tornado here. But they certainly come very close, like to DeSoto, or there have been one or two in the greater Festus area. Certainly in St. John and Perryville, they've been hit, during, our tenure here. But it's not like guaranteed it's going to happen every year. Yeah. There's going to be a hurricane that hits Florida coast probably every year. So he makes the argument, which is a correct one, is, why do we're subsidizing this, and that means we're encouraging it. And so why are we encouraging people to build in that area? It's one thing to put your own money on the line, but it's a big ticket thing, but the people will vote for it. Yeah. And so you don't want to be the governor who says, don't send any of that money.
Yeah, that's the bad luck.
Yeah. But as we run out of money, I think those hard choices are going to be forced upon us. Yeah. Because it's between that and paying some 80-year-old lady who's getting Social Security benefits. We're going to cut those benefits, or we're going to pay off to if we have to make a choice between that and subsidizing a multi-million-dollar mansion rebuild. Yeah. I think we're all going to say, well, wait a second, we got to shore up Social Security first, and we're getting to that point. Yeah. Although people don't realize it.
Yeah. The next article, unless you have more to say.
I have more to say about everything.
Spoiled brat politics is the title. And this one was kind of funny.
This was funny, and I think on point, seeing how this was the summer of brat. Do you remember that?
That's true.
Yes.
Kamala Harris, famously
she was
brat.
A brat. Yeah. I don't know what that is. I
don't. It's an album by Lana Del Rey that was really popular. It was released over the summer, and I don't know the song, but it's something about, kind of woman empowerment, I think, vaguely. Okay. I don't know. The listener will probably correct me on that at some point, but it was something. It was like a very teenage girl, young adult trend, I guess, to be like, I'm so brat, and it was a good thing.
I remember that they had little dolls in the 80s or 90s.
Bratz dolls. I don't think those are the same thing.
Yes, it seems like the entirely same concept.
Probably, I'd probably actually.
Unintentionally. Yeah, I'm sure.
But yeah, spoiled brat politics. And one of the central stories he tells in this article is that a group of golfers were suing a hotel chain because these golfers were wheelchair bound because the hotel chain did not provide golf carts that have the handicap equipment so that you can stand upright, and they have the braces. I've seen videos of them. They're kind of cool. But they sued the hotel chain because it was discrimination because they couldn't use the golf course properly. Yeah. Which, he says is justifiably ridiculous. Yes. Because that's insane. You don't need this extra golf cart. The hotel can provide that if you need it, but it's not violating some sort of law, except they're arguing under the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. Right. He says that's not really what we should be using that for. It's just you want an extra privilege that's not a necessity for you. Your golf game is not a necessity for you to get around town. But that was what they were suing for. Yeah,
and the ADA was I think a well-intentioned statute, and it forces. But he's right when he makes the point. I don't know if I have it pulled out, where it says, Americans with Disability Act, which created a right to sue private institution in order to force them to spend their money to solve the problems of individuals with special problems or special desires, whether serious or frivolous. That's his quote. But he makes the argument that's offloading the community costs onto the private companies, because the federal government says, okay, there's a problem where there's not accommodations for people with disabilities. So instead of the government, all of us paying for it, we're going to let individuals sue individual property owners or employers to get those accommodations. And it made a lot more sense when it was passed. Was that in 74? I'm trying to remember how far back it went. But it's been in existence my entire professional life. And the main problem now is that everybody has a disability. The disability definition is expanded so much. And you have to make, if you're an employer over a certain number of employees or any public entity, which is where I usually see it, you have to have reasonable accommodations for a disability unless they can't perform the essential function of the job. So you can see where all the litigation is: reasonable accommodations and essential functions. Yeah. So what's the essential functions and the accommodations that people end up going through? It's like, well, it's quite common now where you'll get a doctor's note saying, well, because of my anxiety and my mental health disability, I have a real hard time getting up in the morning and showing up to work on time.
Yeah.
And so you have to accommodate my schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So now instead of working during regular office hours of 8 to 4 or whatever, I'm going to stroll in about 10, and I might have to leave at 4.
Yeah.
And then you only get paid for the work that you do, but then you're still full time. You still get benefits, and so
if you get fired, then that's discrimination.
I mean, they argue it now. Of course, the counter argument would be, well, that's an essential function of the job for you to actually be at work to answer the phones because you're the person that answers the phones.
Mm-hmm. And I've seen that, in college especially.
Oh yeah.
With people will ask like during class, like, I have ADHD or autism or whatever. They can list a whole laundry list of things sometimes. And I have trouble focusing. So instead of a final test, can I write a paper?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, no, that's how the course is structured. If you want
Correct.
to take the course, you have to take the test.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes professors will give them that, which I don't think you should. But
what's the downside to giving in? I mean, speaking as a teacher,
a lecturer, I guess.
I am an adjunct instructor, not a lecturer.
Not a lecturer. I apologize.
Although they call me professor, I'm like, I don't think I'm that. I can't claim that mantle. But I get that all the time. I had one student that took classes back-to-back semesters. First semester, no accommodations. I didn't even know he had a disability. I mean, I knew he was weird, but that's not a disability. The second semester, he says, at the first quiz, here's this letter from the academic affairs, which is the first time I've seen it. There's a lack of communication with my dean anyway, but I need an accommodation on this quiz. I said, wait a second, this is the same format as the 4 quizzes you took last semester. Yeah. What accommodations are you requesting? And there's a whole process that they're supposed to go through prior to the administration of the test. And I don't have to, under our rules, I don't have to agree to it. Now they can appeal that if I say I don't agree to it. But so you have to do that ahead of time. You can't just say, I'm going to go in this other room by myself and take this test and maybe cheat. Maybe not. And I'm not saying this student was going to do that. But I'm like, whoa, slow your roll there. Mm-hmm. There's a process for this. But this student was claiming that and the disability evidently existed the previous semester, and he got a fine grade in the first semester. So and he completed all the tests without difficulty, as far as I know. And but the second semester I ended up making accommodations for him. Yeah. Now I could have said no, but there's no incentive for me as an instructor to deny that, and there's literally no incentive for me to have high standards as an instructor.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of disincentives too.
100%,
because the court of public opinion is very strong on college campuses, especially at a very small college campus where everybody knows every single professor, like I was at up at Truman.
Yeah.
So it's like if you're the professor who said no to denying someone the ability to not take a test something because of ADHD, then you are the ableist professor, and that is how people will know you, and they will file complaints against you.
For sure.
Like that is why would you?
There's no reason to.
Exactly.
There's no reason to, and so you might as well let the coasters coast, and then focus your attention on trying to do your best job as a teacher for those students that are really interested and will live up to the standards. But every semester, let's see, I've done it. How many semesters have I had? I did a summer. Let's say I've done it 6. I think I might have done it 6 separate semesters. Every time I've had in the middle of the course, good students, good people. There'll be one at least that'll say, hey, I have a such and such GPA, 4.0 GPA or whatever. Right now, I'm at a B. I really want an A in this class. So is there something extra I can do to goose up my grade? Paraphrasing. Yeah. Every semester. I'm like, no. I mean, granted, the course is, I think, is so easy. Maybe I just don't understand how college is nowadays, these youngsters. But it's an easy course, and you have to really kind of try to not get an A. And I'm like, no. That's the only thing I'll just flat out say no. I'm not going to, because then I'm doing extra work.
Yeah.
then there's all of a sudden we hit it. There is a disincentive for me to make that accommodation because then I've got to do work grading or reviewing whatever crap you're going to submit. What are you talking about? Take the test.
There you go.
So somehow those changes to our educational system, I know I'm on a sidetrack,
No, that's all right.
have to be made at the administration level so that they have to say, no, we're going to have these standards, minimum standards. We're going to expect you to be higher than this as instructors. We're expecting higher standards than this, and we will back you 100%. Yeah. And if anybody defames you, we will open up disciplinary investigation against you. Because if a student lies about you publicly, the administration needs to take action. Yeah. Because if they say this guy's X, Y, Z, P, D, and Q, and they're lying about it, or this gal, then there has to be a code of ethics.
Yeah. But then the problem is, of course, what's the incentive for the university administration to do that? Because if they're able just to have good grades across the board, why do we care if
ultimately it has to be the board of trustees. So I'm talking about
strong-willed people on the board.
I'm talking about public entities is where it's going to have to start, and then you have to build the culture at rebuild the culture at universities.
For sure.
If there were instructors that are as lenient as I am today. In the old school college system 50 years ago,
you'd be fired immediately.
I'd be fired. Yeah. I mean, you're doing true and false multiple choice questions. What are you, retarded? Because they would use that term, baby. They'd be more erudite. They would use some fancy word that I don't know for that term or don't recall. And so there was a culture of excellence. And you have to rebuild that, and now it has to come from the top. You have to have a governor that says, "I'm going to appoint a bunch of badasses to the board of trustees. They're going to hire a badass administrator, and they're just going to force it down on people, and they have to fight through it to get rid of all the bad professors, which is hard."
Yeah. And I know I might be unusual, and one of my brothers would call me a try-hard for this. But, I think my whole college experience has been really, really easy so far. I've had a few classes where it's like, this was kind of a difficult paper that I had to work all semester on, things like that. But by and large, the whole process has been kind of a breeze.
Yes.
I think, I might be a little weird for saying this, but I wish it was a little harder sometimes. And I wish that I was being pushed to learn more. But I think just so many of the standards have dropped, that you're kind of catering towards the lowest common denominator in every class, that you're not pushing, students to really learn as much as you were. And that's why I took up so many extracurricular things and stuff like that, just to add stuff to my schedule, stuff that I cared about and could put effort into.
Well, and I think there are more people like you than people would publicly admit. Because if you go around saying that, then people what's wrong with that person? You're a curve blower. But I think that's true of a lot of, it's like, tough love, that kind of thing. But
I hear a dog clicking outside.
That's all right. She's
sniffing the door. I don't know if that's going to come through in the mics.
I hope so. All right, the next, so I'll keep going on.
This one was fantastic.
Because it's about vocabulary.
Yes, but it really is the point he makes, I think, kind of simply, is that, if you change the words and you kind of frame the debate in the words that you want them to be in, you will win, no matter what. Yeah. The example he points is, he had an angry email from a reader that said, why should we give up, certain issues be determined by the dictates of the market?
Yes.
And he says, okay, well, what dictates? People choosing, the economic option, people choosing the best option for them, that's a dictate?
Yeah.
But that's how people frame it. It's the dictates of some nebulous entity. And that example can be used for everything. You can come up with examples of that same principle for every single thing. If you control the words that are used, then you win the debate, because you are framing how people think about it, how people feel about it before they even start thinking about it.
Yep.
You just give these preconceived notions. You use choice words that are loaded with these connotations and these meanings. If you describe an issue with those words, then people are going to feel a way about that issue that you want them to feel without them thinking about it in the first place.
Yeah, and it was bad here where he's talking about, like, there's some terms that he's using here that you never hear.
Yeah.
And now they're even more anodyne. So he's talking about, like, you talk about bums. Like, people used to describe people as bums. If you're a bum and you're begging for money on the street, and you're an able-bodied person who could work, but you just don't, you're a bum.
Yeah.
Well, not even now. They were at this time in 2004 era, when he's writing this, maybe a little bit later, he's saying, well, they're homeless. He said, well,
says,
that's not really an accurate description because there are a lot of people that don't have own a home. But now, of course, I think we're houseless. I think that that's a new term.
Well, you're not supposed to use adjectives as the denominal adjective.
Right.
The homeless is bad. There are people experiencing homeless. To call them, people experiencing houselessness.
Right.
Which is absolutely ridiculous.
Yes.
We make adjectives into nominal phrases all the time. That's just how language works to describe a category of people. We've done that forever.
Yeah.
But now that's wrong because we're making them into an object based on this one characteristic that changes.
Yes.
And I really like his point here. But he says, crimes committed by bums are covered up by the media by verbally transforming, quote, the homeless into transients or drifters whenever they commit crimes.
Yes.
So it's not the homeless committing the crime. So this is a drifter who was just in town for this brief period of time and he committed the crime. But this is not a problem among, the homeless population.
Right.
They're all peaceful people, things like that. And you could do that with any group of anything, with any issue. If you just change the words you use, then you can kind of, make any group pure and holy by excluding the people from that group with other words.
Do you think that in the society at large, my argument against homeless people is starting to prevail? I think, because there's I want to give up our personal history and detail of my battles in the educational system advocating for the divinity of homeless people and homeless encampments has been my real big battle. Or in youth curriculum, advocating that homeless encampments are not dangerous places, or not bad sub-societal organizations, I guess to put it in anodyne language. But I think people are starting to come around to the dangerous nature of these communities. Like you look at the obscene extreme examples in like Portland and Los Angeles and San Francisco, where it's like, wait a second, we can't just let everybody do whatever the hell they want, and for these several block radius is garbage. We can put dumpsters out there, but they're not gonna use them, or they'll fill them up so quickly, and then somebody will turn it over and spread it around. I mean, because it's chaos. But the vocabulary that they use then of course they fail because they don't understand how to actually address the problem, or at least try to address the problems, the so-called root causes, which is not white supremacy. I got to tell you, it's drug addiction, mental health issues, sloth and gluttony and antisocial behavior. And if you're going to address those homeless encampments, that's what you have to address, and you have to do it tough. I mean, it's hard and consistently, but they use language that manipulates everything. Of course, the illegal immigration angle has been intentionally manipulated since the 1980s. They changed the AP style guidelines for reporting, changed so that you can't use illegal immigrant in an AP story. It's undocumented or undocumented migrant, when the most accurate, if you're not going to have a pejorative illegal alien, is documented foreign citizen.
Yes.
I mean, or foreign citizen.
Yeah.
But they are citizens.
They have documents somewhere.
They are not. They are not from Mars.
Yeah.
They didn't drop from outer space. They came as a citizen of another country to our country, and there's a legal meaning from that. So this vocabulary, he was so right on about this, and about how the manipulation of the vocabulary works on so many people, and that's why I get a little cautiously optimistic in the last year that I think people are finally catching on. Yeah. They've been lying to us, and I think. God help me, I'm going to say something good about COVID. I was, again, of course, completely astounded and scared by the public's reaction to COVID and their acceptance of these government mandates. However, the government were such liars about it, about everything. I think even the people that were really COVID maniacs, the vast majority of them are like, they've lied to us. Yeah. We did all these things and we were trying to be good people, and they lied to us about everything. And I think it's starting to dawn on. And then I think this Biden elder thing and the Biden corruption stuff, they just finally released pictures of Biden and his son with the Chinese officials this last week that they buried for years.
That didn't happen. That never happened.
He never met with them, evidently. But there's a picture of all of them in our archives.
Yeah.
They lied to us. Yeah. And so I think this manipulation of language, I think we need people in the new media to call it out. And I think we're starting to see that. Yeah. But boy, it's so dangerous because they're manipulating what is truth. Yeah. And they've done it so well. Yeah. I mean, they've been really effective. And he's right on this one.
For sure. The next article here is unfunded mandates.
I think we only have time for this last one.
Okay, sure. Right? We can end it there.
But I filibustered long enough, so we didn't have to go into the topics I didn't read. Yes.
Okay, yeah, sure. We can read this one and then be done.
Victory.
But this one was good because this kind of ties back into the ADA stuff we were talking about earlier.
The unfunded mandates.
Yeah, the government is very, very prone to say, okay, this is something that is now required. We're not going to fund it. But if somebody does not provide this thing for you, you can sue them.
Yes.
And so all of that burden is falling on these private companies, where it's like, well, this is the government's job. You said this something had to be done. You are mandating that this occur, and now you're saying, okay, now we're the ones who are bearing the burden for it.
Yeah.
How can that be if you guys are the ones deciding that this is mandatory?
Yeah.
And I forget all the examples. Or he said safety, minimum wages, clean air, things like that.
Yes.
And again, going back to the language is like, well, who's going to be against safety? Who's going to be against clean air?
Right.
It's like, well, we don't want to be, against those things, but we would be against, the government mandating that it happen without putting any weight behind it, or any money behind it. Yeah.
Right.
Because it's just saying, do it, and it's up to you to do it. No money from us.
Yeah. I'm reminded. I'm not going to say who it is, but we have a relative that lives in another country, and we're talking about maternity leave and paternity leave. And this other country has tremendously generous, lengthy maternity and paternity leave benefits. But I was fascinated by it because evidently they have it really in the form of unemployment insurance and a job, basically a guarantee for a return to the job, which is different than our current system, because our current system is the employer has to pay. Right now we have unpaid leave that's mandatory from the federal government. But the push in America is, well, every company should have to pay paid leave. I'm like, how are we supposed to pay this person 12 weeks plus to not work here, for crying out loud? I mean, why is that on us? And that necessarily is going to end up suppressing people hiring women, I think, because, but if it's universal, it's going to just suppress hiring anybody. Yeah. Anybody that is of childbearing age, even if you're a man, because you're going to partner up with somebody who's going to have a child and you're out for paternity leave. Yeah. And now I got to pay, 12 weeks for nothing. So that system kind of, I was fascinated by it because I do like pro-family policies so that, because I hate the daycare system. Yeah. I hate that people, the working class and the working poor, have to pay. They don't. I mean, you say, well, they don't have to, but financially, with both spouses working, those kids are in daycare for like 12 hours. Yeah. From like 6 weeks old on. I mean, it's just such a horrible situation. Even the best daycare possible, loving people and everybody I've known that has taken care of our kids with any of those situations, been great. And there's wonderful people in that field, and that's a really hard job, and they have been low paying. But there has to be a way to change this system so that we can figure out a way to get,
I think everybody recognizes
either mom or dad
to have a parent
in the
raising
home.
their own child.
Correct. And I don't like government subsidies, but man, if we're gonna pay for anything, get those kids in the home. Yeah.
And especially, like the other country we're talking about, where it's structured like in sort of an unemployment funds. We're already paying unemployment anyway. Why wouldn't we use some of that money for people who we know are going back to work in order for them to raise children? Yeah. I think that's a great reason, if we're going to be using all of this government money anyway, we're going to be using taxpayer money for anything, then use it for those people who are actively raising a child and are going to go back to work. Like that is a much better use of taxpayer money.
Well, the best system is a system where you can make enough money, one of you can work full-time, support the family.
And that's the way it used to be.
Yeah, one or the other. Now, of course, we have a lot more spending. Yeah. So there's a different side of it there, too, because if you're going to have, like, this house is considered like a medium house, but it's huge by standards of a generation before me. Yeah. As far as square footage and the, all the stuff that we have, but we are not, I mean, and of course I have a bunch of vehicles, second, third-hand vehicles.
Used car lot outside.
But you wouldn't have those kind of vehicles with my parents' generation. Of course, they were kind of like really 2 generations ahead of me because of their age, but like they were born in the 20s. And so in the 1940s, you'd have maybe one car, maybe. And then really affluent people would have 2, but why would they need 2 cars? Yeah. Especially in the communities where you have everything closer anyway. But anyway, I've gone off on a completely different thing. But the unfunded mandates for the corporations to keep having to fund these things for the benefits that we all think as a society that people should have. Well, why are we doing this all through employers? Like we have we're talking about health insurance earlier. Why do we have an employer-based healthcare system? Yeah. Doesn't make any sense. Why is our job supplying health insurance? Yeah, they're not supplying car insurance, but I drive a car to work every day. Why the hell do they have to pay health insurance? And why is there a tax benefit? Because what it is there's a tax benefit for an employer, a subsidy for the employer to pay premiums for healthcare insurance. Yeah. So there's an incentive for the employer to do it. And also there's an expectation. You want to recruit people where you give them all these extra benefits. Well, you can basically write that expense off on the corporation's taxes because you're supplying healthcare insurance. But why do we even have a system like that instead of a separate, and that's part of what Obamacare was separating that out, and you have these market exchanges or whatever so that you can go from one job to the other without a gap insurance. And that makes a lot of sense. But that's why if you leave your job, you have COBRA benefits, which means you can pay on your own the payments, the premiums, but then your employer's not paying it, so you're paying full freight. And all of a sudden, oh my God, that's how much it costs? I never paid attention when they told me. So all these mandates, some partially funded, a lot not funded, really kind of slows down the entire economy and makes these really perversions and these extra costs that they're just inefficient. Yeah. And I don't know what the solution is now because everybody expects everything from everybody else.
It's very true.
But, when the whole thing crashes down in the financial crisis of March of 2025, then we'll have a nice, strong corrective.
Yeah, that's a good prediction, I think, to end this episode on.
I'm thinking March. What do you think? Yeah, March or April, complete financial collapse. Yeah,
we'll see.
Buy guns and ammo.
All right. Do you have any other final thoughts?
Maybe a water filtration system.
There you go. Well, this has been season 10, episode 6.
You don't have any final thoughts?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Do you want me to have final thoughts?
Well, yeah, I went on like a 10-minute rant there, and you haven't said anything.
I don't think I have anything to add to that. No,
all right, very good.
Maybe I should buy a gun. Maybe that's the solution.
Sounds good to me.
I don't have a gun.
We can't get you'd have to buy it down
in Florida.
Yeah, because you're not going to be able to take it. Well, you can check it.
Check a gun. Yeah.
That is true.
That's true. Yeah, a lot to think about. Well, this has been season 10, episode 6 of Unlimited Opinions. I've been Adam Bishop.
Still Mark Bishop.
You can, of course, follow us on Twitter at ULMTD Opinions.